Welcome to today's episode of Time Well Spent. It is my great pleasure to welcome Shon Scott-Clarke, who is a parent of 4 children, the youngest currently in grade 8 at one of our elementary schools. She is a guest speaker and educator on Canadian Black history and has been a member of various groups including the Black Business Professionals Association, the Jamaican Canadian Association, and is a founder of Sisters with a Mission, an organization created to help combat barriers to the success of young Black women. Most recently, she's been involved in the local community, working with the Barrie Police Services and the United Way of Simcoe Muskoka Youth Program. Thank you so much for your time today, Shon, as we explore the concept of racism and the steps that we can all take to move forward in standing up against it and the harm that it causes.
I just want to advise that I work in the social service sector as a case manager, advocating for individuals looking for homes who are currently homeless. I've established Mothers Against Police Profiling as a concerned mother after 46-year-old George Floyd was killed by police in Minnesota on May 25th, 2020. Not only do we want to advocate for police profiling, but to stop the corrupt abuse of law enforcement, and they should be held accountable. I'm also the founder of United Partnerships Association Support Services. It's a nonprofit organization that works to empower children with self-positive education to realize their potential. The association works to build partnerships with communities in Canada and Jamaica. And while working with the YMCA of the Greater Toronto Area, I developed workshops designed for parents and families to understand diversity. That's just a little bit about me, just a little bit.
I appreciate that so much, Shon.
I feel a deep sense of responsibility to share and teach students about the contributions of Black people in our history to remove racism in Canada. Black History Month is more than just playing reggae music or eating ethnic food. Black History Month was created to recognize people of color and their contributions to their country. While it is valuable to discuss individuals who have helped shape the world around us, such as Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Barack Obama, we should also know Black individuals who have contributed to Canada, such as Elijah McCoy, Josiah Henson, and Lincoln Alexander, just to name a few. Black history provides an opportunity for all history to be learned, not only reflect one perspective. As Black people, we are concerned that the history being taught in schools mainly focuses on male Europeans, people from Great Britain and France, who are white. Education on Black history would increase student and staff members' knowledge of Canadian history and provide an understanding of Black Canadian contributions. And lastly, Black history is a time to learn about Canadian history. So Black History Month is a time to learn about Canadian history and the important contributions of Black Canadians to the settlement, growth, and development of Canada. Black history is really everyone's history. I've seen strategic hiring practices, which is really good. Diversity in staff is very imperative. It's important to see that staff reflect the student body. Mm-hmm. So it is good for students to see people that look like them in principal roles, in teacher roles, etc. I've also seen the openness of welcoming presentations like myself of Black history, but I believe it would be beneficial to be included in curriculum and not only during the month of February. Well, I'm all about education on Black history, but the first thing we would need to unpack the invisible knapsack of white privilege and not be afraid to talk about it. White privilege exists when white people are born, bred into white privilege, white supremacist society. Then racism creeps in to uphold white privilege and is woven into our every area of life. White privilege comes from family, history taught in schools, movies, films, workforce, governments. So when white privilege becomes visible, we can see racism at its true form and combat discrimination. We are aware that systemic racism has led to education inequalities and mediocre educational opportunities for most Black people, and know the very nature of racism in this country is covert and overt. So I think unpacking the invisible knapsack of white privilege is really an important thing. The other thing is to address white fragility. So there is a book with this title written by Robin DiAngelo, and he discusses why it's so hard for white people to talk about racism. Actually, the presentation that I just did a few days ago, a teacher commented and said, you know, this would be so hard to talk about. And my response is, why? Why is that? Is this why it hasn't been done in the curriculum? Because people not of color feel like it's too hard? It's not easy for people of color, myself, to call out racism. When we decide to talk about these things, not only are we having to confront our own feelings of hurt that even this happened, disappointment, anger, we know that we're risking a lot of reactions, but we need to decide to talk about it so that we can fix it. And we know that it could indeed, build relationships and friendships and partnerships. So those are the two things that I think really need to be addressed. There are too many anecdotes and personal stories to share, unfortunately. Someone in a laundromat tells me to go back where I come from. And so I laugh and I say, well, do you mean go back to Mount Sinai Hospital in Toronto? Because that's where I was born, Everyone has migrated from somewhere. Some people have more generations than others, but everyone has come from somewhere. And so we need to be aware. And I think that's why education is really important, letting individuals know about Black history. I mean, we've been here for over 400 years. So that's really concerning. The other point I want to talk about is the racial word was used in my daughter's school recently. And I'm like, really? This is 2021, 21st century, and that's still happening. My son has been stopped on his bike and questioned by police, and the list just goes on and on. But lastly, I want to talk about on September 29th, 2020, there was a racial attack against a 10-year-old Black boy near Ottawa in the city of Russell. His arm was broken in two places after being called racial slurs, and the boys involved were only under 12. How do these attacks continue to happen? Would this have happened if we had proactive engagement in our schools to talk about Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color? What and how can this change? And I strongly believe it's through education.
Shon, I appreciate that. It's a raw and powerful story that you've shared with us today, and the fact that you've given us your time. You've shared with us a parental perspective with us as Simcoe County District School Board staff is really appreciated. It's provided us with another opportunity for learning, for reflection related to our strategic pillar of equity, diversity, and inclusion. This was indeed time well spent. Thank you so much.
Thank you for allowing me to share.